We knew that the abortion ban was coming. It is not a surprise, but it's no less shocking because the cruelty is so apparent from so many other states that have already done this.
The closing of abortion clinics is a major victory for unborn babies, and we're sending a message to the rest of the nation.
Reaction from both sides this week to the news that Indiana's near total ban on abortion is now in effect. We asked Governor Holcomb for his thoughts on the impact this new law will have.
Those expressions from the justices reflect the public as well. And so there's a proper process for these things to be debated and aired and litigated, and they will. And now we have a role to make sure that we're executing on the law that was passed.
We also spoke with Attorney General Todd Rokita.
There's reasonable exceptions to protect all life. And I'm very proud of the General Assembly for what they've done. I'm proud to defend that law in court and demonstrate to the rest of the world, business and individuals alike, that there is still a market for life.
The ACLU of Indiana executive director said, quote, "Today is a dark day in Indiana's history as a near total ban takes effect. We've seen the horrifying impact of bans like this across the country, and the narrow exceptions included in this extreme ban will undoubtedly put lives at risk. We'll continue to fight in court," they say, to clarify and expand on the current exceptions. I also spoke this week with House Minority Leader Phil Giaquinta from Fort Wayne.
Going back to the original decision, we were certainly disappointed there with what the state Supreme Court came back with. But I think more importantly, we're just terribly disappointed for women and girls of the state that are really going to have their reproductive health care decisions taken away from them. We have an election coming up in November of 2024. And unlike in 2022, 2024, this will be the first election that we will have seen the ban in place. And voters will have their opportunity that now to express their opinion. There were some states, if you look at like Michigan, for example, that has politically balanced maps, they took the majority in the House and the Senate, and partly on this issue of abortion.
All right, let's bring in our panel right now to talk about the latest from the State House and from the campaign trail. With us this week, we have former State Party Chair Robin Winston for the Indiana Democrats, along with former Indiana lawmaker, Republican Mike Murphy. And the doctors with us today as well. We have Professor Dr. Martin Sweet from Purdue University and Professor Dr. Laura Wilson from the University of Indianapolis. And Laura, I'll start with you. As we talk about the state's abortion ban taking effect, what impact will this issue have in next year's elections, and what degree could that vary, really, depending on whether you're looking at things at the national level or right here in Indiana?
Well, the law in Indiana is decided for now, but that certainly doesn't mean the debate is over. And I think you can see how important it is nationally just when you think about Wednesday evening and the Republican debate in terms of the primary for president. You saw a great variety of opinion there, and that was the second or third question that the moderators asked. So I think it'll be very prevalent, certainly at a federal level and nationally in terms of 2024 politics. For more local elections and state elections, I think part of it depends. It's how much it resonates with those independents, how much it resonates with voters who wouldn't have otherwise turned out. And then, of course, there are the candidates, too, if this is going to be their single issue that's going to drive folks. But it's not gone. It's not forgotten, right? We're just on the next phase.
And Martin, how do you see that playing out in 2024? Abortion certainly a big topic of conversation at the debate. As Laura mentioned Wednesday night, Mike Pence taking a much firmer stance on the potential for a national abortion ban. What did you make of his remarks?
Right. Well, I think Pence took what we'd consider a very principled decision, or at least certainly that's what he would argue, whereas you saw someone like Nikki Haley take a much more practical stance. It's interesting, right, that Republicans for a long time have spoken about federalism, that they want these decisions to be made by the states. Some of that debate came out here too, but with a number of Republicans now taking a position, hey, there should be a national law on this and not simply just leave it to the states. We'll see how that really plays out. Federalism is not really an idea that catches the public so much. It might appeal to constitutional law professors, but I thought Pence did what he was expected to do and taking a nice principled stance.
What did you make of Pence's remarks on that topic and his debate performance more broadly on Wednesday night?
I think his stance is absolutely principled. He's been consistent. I think people respect consistency. The woman who was quoted earlier talked about cruelty. I can't think of anything more cruel than killing babies. And so I don't think it's going to have a major impact on the election here in Indiana because people have been so set in their views over many years, and Republicans will continue to win by 18, 19, 20% margins. Overall, Mike Pence did exactly what I suggested that morning he should do, even though I didn't talk to him, and that is stand on the Constitution unapologetically, which he did, and confirm your pro-life stance more strongly than anybody else in the room, which he also did. And by most accounts, even the New York Times, he came in first or second place in the debate. I think it was a great night for Mike Pence.
He also threw some elbows at times, a little sharper Mike Pence than we've seen before, perhaps taking on some of the other candidates. Robin, how did you see that debate from across the aisle? What was your big takeaway Wednesday night?
Well, I think there was a Donald Trump drone hanging over the whole debate. Everybody, that was clearly the Donald Trump show with some other people as guests there for a little bit, actually 2 hours long. Back on the abortion issue, I don't know how that's going to pan out. Nobody here knows exactly, but just think about Kansas and Kentucky and Ohio, 3 states that Donald Trump won, but when you put the thing on the ballot, the people of those states and the women of those states lined up and said, we don't want to have our freedoms taken away. So while it may not be a primary issue among people in the General Assembly, I do believe it'll resonate in November of 24.
Let's take a look at some other key moments from Wednesday's debate. Here's one exchange with Pence taking on Vivek Ramaswamy.
Joe Biden has weakened this country at home and abroad. Now is not the time for on-the-job training.
The two of them went back and forth quite a bit, but one of the more interesting moments of the night was this question here.
If former President Trump is convicted in a court of law, would you still support him as your party's choice? Please raise your hand if you would.
So it took a moment there, but most of them did raise their hands. Candidates had to sign a pledge indicating that they would support the eventual nominee. 5 or 6 of the 8 candidates raising their hands there to indicate yes, they would, including former Indiana Governor Mike Pence. Laura, what did you make of that moment, that exchange there with the former president, not there in person, but certainly looming large with his legal troubles that played out this week in Georgia?
It was a significant question, right? He's led in every single poll, so even in his absence, he had to be addressed. He had to have that moment. I thought Chris Christie would have done better had Trump been there. He looked like someone who showed up to a fight and there was only one person there, so you couldn't actually have it. But he was the only one that really had that deference. Everybody else said that they would, in fact, favor and support, and that was really important.
Martin, it's been noted that Ron DeSantis kind of looked around a little bit, raised his hands. I know you have a background there in Florida politics. What's the reaction to his debate Wednesday night?
Right. I mean, I think the DeSantis camp is very happy with what he did. He wasn't torn down as many thought he might be. He spoke directly to the people. But he also wasn't the focus of all the fire, which sort of tells you something, right? I mean, nobody hunts small deer.
Ramaswamy was.
Right? And so it sort of tells you that maybe people weren't that afraid of him anymore. Yeah. We'll see how the campaigning goes from here. But I'm not sure it was all that DeSantis hoped for in the big coming out debate.
Mike, I also want to ask you about this proposal out this week in the race for governor from Lieutenant Governor Crouch to get rid of the state's individual income tax. Will that help her in the primary, and is that a realistic plan?
Sure, it's a realistic plan. Anytime you cut people's taxes, it's a realistic plan for both Democrats and Republicans, because the tax cuts don't say they're Republican tax cuts or Democrat tax cuts. So all Hoosiers will benefit. And why not? We have $7 billion in the bank. Why not give the money back to the people? In this case, in a permanent rate decrease. I think we're just over 3% now. One quick comment on the debate. Vivek, and I continue to call him Vivek until I learn how to pronounce his last name correctly. I think he looked to me like a game show host. You might as well have Pat Sajak in there. I mean, the smug grin, the comments that really made no sense, and the lack of depth and originality were rather stunning. I think it was a big loss for him.
Robin, quickly, I'll give you the last word here.
I don't know about the tax thing. Where do you make up the revenue? And then is it going to be a regressive tax? And we got people, we got some of the cities in our state are some of the poorest in the nation. And we've got people who are going to pay more for, I don't know, basic life essentials. I mean, I don't know that. You said that $7 billion is going to be saved or whatever. The bottom line is there are about 7 billion Republican candidates for governor. She's got to make her way out of there somehow, and I guess this is her choice.
A lot of candidates in that race. We'll continue to talk about that. Coming up next, we'll talk about the Indiana Library now suspending a controversial policy that led to hundreds of books being moved. We'll have the latest right after this.